Rod, we have the opportunity in just a few minutes to interview Cecilia Soto Gonzalez, who is currently in the Mexican legislature, and she's had a very active political career both in Sonora and in national life.
Yes, Bill. In fact, the reason why I really was interested in interviewing her is that she became the presidential candidate of the Labor Party in the 1994 presidential election and was the first female candidate to win nearly 1 million votes in that race. So I think she is a symbol of the changing position of women in Mexican politics and has served as a role model for many younger women in past generations.
We're going to have a chance to hear her talk about her activities at the local level, the state level, the federal level, but also working with women's groups in Sonora and actually working in Maquila.
You had an extremely challenging childhood, losing both of your parents at a young age and then moving to Hermosillo to live with your maternal grandparents in Mexico City. What prompted you to pursue a career in public life, initially as a deputy to the state legislature of Sonora? And were you influenced significantly by the fact that your grandfather, Ignacio Soto, who was governor of Sonora, from 1949 to 1955?
Well, the story begins before. I think what really influenced me was the Cold War and was growing with, I read Anna Frank's book when I was 11, and I said, this is what I have to do in life. I mean, I think I formulated it in a very naive way in terms of fighting for the good. Then there was the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, which was also in '61. So, and I read a lot. I read a lot, and I think that was the main thing that provoked what I call a kind of complex of San Juana de Arco, this thing of being a world savior or something like that. And then the second big thing was that I moved from a school of nuns, a religious school. I finished preparatoria. And then I went to the National University in Mexico City and to the science faculty. I studied physics. Science faculty was very, very interesting and different from other faculties because it was the best physics school. And so everybody, not only poor students, but all kind of students went there. And when I entered, I entered in '69, and so many of the leaders were in jail. And for me, that was very enriching. I mean, I thought this is Mexico, not the bubble I was living at, but a very mixed society, a very rich society, and they were all politicized, and we will take food for the incarcerated prisoners. And, but I still was very, very naive. I remember that I listened to the speech of one leader and then listened to the speech of the opposite group, and I will believe both of them. No, I didn't understand this Marxist thing until 1971 arrived. So 1971 there was this, well, first 68, it was before I entered the university. I told my grandmother, Grandma, I'm going to buy something at the supermarket. And then I walk and join the demonstration. It was the first demonstration led by the UNAM dean, and it was a fantastic feeling of power. Very, 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 very impressive. Then I entered the university, and then there was this big demonstration in 1971 that was massacred by the government. I remember I never felt so much fear. We were walking, and the streets were closed by the police. And we continued walking, and then there was these screams, los halcones, los halcones. And I was so naive that I said, los halcones, is it a rock group or what? No? And so we looked for a place to hide, and then we ran and ran and ran and ran, and we finally arrived to the university, and one of our classmates went to the auditorium of the medicine faculty, and there were 18 cadavers. No? So it seems that there were like 40 something people dead. That changed me. That afternoon, that evening, I said, I don't understand why this happened, and I have to understand it. Second, first, I'm going to change the world. First. Second, I'm going to understand why this happened. Third, if I marry, I'm going to marry a man that is committed to the same thing. So, to understand things, I started with Marxism, which was interesting. You know, Lenin's State and Revolution? I don't remember the title. But it was quite a schematic view of society. You have structure, superstructure, and things like that. You know, so I think I stayed Marxist for about 10 years. And so I joined a lot of movements, student movements, horror movements like the labor committees, and I married a man who did exactly the same. He was the leader of the University of Sonora, who also led a very, very important movement there. And we were still with this idea of changing the world. I'm still with that idea. And then I started to read the classics, Plato, especially Plato, Aristotle, and Leibniz. And it seemed to me that Marx was very ephemeral, that Marx wouldn't last 100 years while these giants will last. So I started to enrich my cultural view, and I was, and then when I was 32, we left the labor committees, this organization, and my husband and I said that we should go to Hermosillo and we should start trying to try electoral processes. That is, we abandoned that idea that electoral process was bourgeois democracy and that strange language. So I think I ran for the first time for the mayorship of Hermosillo as an independent candidate, and I got 900 votes, which is interesting. It's good for your ego, that even that you are such a wonderful person, they don't vote for you. So, and of course we didn't have any means, and so. Then in 85, There was this very interesting governor of Sonora, Samuel Ocaña, who is still alive. He's a very, very interesting guy. And I think he saw myself and Patricio as, how do you say, desperdicio, as somebody that is wasted? Energy being wasted. So I think that's my hypothesis. He told the PARM, remember the PARM, to talk with us. For us, the PARM, El Partido Auténtico, was the worst thing in the world. Was the worst thing in the world. But we were furiously anti-panistas, furiously anti-priistas, and the left didn't like us because we were in the labor committees. So this guy, which was a very interesting guy, Carlos Enrique Canturrosas, was the first mayor whose mayorship was accepted by Echeverría. We talked with him and we told him that we will join if and only if the PARM would make a kind of primaries in order not to have a priista for candidate. So this was 80, 85, and 87 was before the elections of 88. So we toured the country, and in October of 87, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas quit the PRI. And the only party that was brave enough to give him a hand was the PARM. Why? Well, Carlos Enrique Canturrosas was a very, very flashy guy. He liked big things and he liked, to be in the media and to be bold. So he told Cárdenas to come with us. The left reacted a little bit as I personally reacted. This guy from the PRI, no. But I was not a big figure there, so we accepted his candidacy, and it was fascinating to go with him in campaign because he really has depth, and he's not flashing. He's very clear of what he wants. He understands. He's not dogmatic. So I went with him to campaign in Sonora. In Sonora, his father, President Cárdenas, gave lands to the Yaqui tribe and to peasants, to many peasants. So I saw for the first time what charisma, even he's not charismatic, no? Right. Charisma means, peasants came to touch his shirt. It was really, really very impressive for me. And then we think he won the presidency. So when we went to Mexico City to defend the vote, that was really, really impressive because you found every laborer saying, I voted for Cuauhtémoc. All the waiters in the restaurants, the people at the subway, the taxi driver, all people that were not higher ups, they said, I voted for Cuauhtémoc. So it was really, really what you call a mass movement. And especially, I don't talk about, while this happened, you had this big meeting at La Laguna, where you had more than 100,000 people there for him. And that was a moment when the parties from the left joined us, with the exception of Rosario Ibarra de Piedra, who was candidate for the second time. So when that happened, I entered as a local congresswoman in Sonora, and it was also a process of learning. I had this complex of Juana de Arco that I told you. So the local Congress seemed to me too small. Beltrones was the governor of Sonora at that time, and everything was completely undemocratic. You know that the transcripts of the sessions of Congress must be public. Well, they weren't public. They weren't public. They offer money, and of course I rejected it. We discovered that gasoline was sold by a clique of trade union leaders. So one of them came to us and told us, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years. We take the 1% that Pemex estimates is their losses from Salina Cruz to Guaymas, and we use that 1% and sell it to gas stations at a lower price. And if they don't buy it, we will not sell them gasoline. And that's wonderful. We have been living with that for 20 years, but now we are trying to sell it to narcos, and that I don't want. So my husband made a denunciation at the Federal Congress, I at the local Congress. The leader of the trade union, Pemex trade union in Sonora, was my colleague at the Congress. I also remember feeling with a lot of fear when he entered into my office and saying, "But why are you doing this to us? We are kind." He said, I have a testigo. How do you say testigo?
Witness.
I have a witness. So I hold for his testimony. So they jailed 26 people, 1 year. Not him, because he had immunity. After 1 year, Pemex said that not a single drop of oil was missing. At the same time, something very important that changed me was that we were supporting a cooperative of fishermen. There was at that time what are called 8 species reserved only for cooperatives. That was shrimp, and the most important one was shrimp, and 7 others species that were only reserved for cooperatives. And the cacique of the cooperatives was a former mayor from Guaymas and from the Puy, who started as a good leader and then devolved as a cacique. He had a special little army, and if somebody didn't want to sell shrimp for him, he will blacklisted him. So we started we were naive still, so we started a democratic process in the cooperative. So they elect democratic leaders, democratic fishermen. And we won about half of the cooperatives Very, very important. So, in order for you to get to be acknowledged, have an official acknowledgement by the Ministry of Fisheries, you have to have what is called el toma nota. So the Ministry of Fisheries says, I tomo nota, I acknowledge that this guy was elected. With that document, you go to the banks and get credit to go fishing. So what happened? The Ministry of Fisheries didn't give us the toma nota. So, and the shrimp season was going to start, and so we started a strike. You have these fishermen who were fed with shrimp since they were 2 years old, tall, strong, no? But they're so coward with their leader, no? At that time, I didn't like women issues. No? I had this Joana de Arco complex, so I wanted to run the world, be Minister of Treasury, and things. So women things were boring for me, and it was also a reaction to the way the political parties or political movements in Mexico worked for women. You want to be here? Well, you serve the coffee and things like that, no? So there was not a culture of cultivating women issues. And so I didn't like it. So there were these tall, strong fishermen that trembled before their former leader. So women said to me, let's do other things. And they did things completely unorthodox for me. For example, a mass for the fisherman movement. You know, I was agnostic, I was anti-church, so you know, let's do this, let's collect money in this way, let's make a sit-in, very creative things for this woman. So I started to see a potential of energy in the women movement that I could say it was an after and a before and after that. So we won, and it was the saddest victory in my political history. We won, and when the fishermen went to their cooperatives, they were completely sacked? No, how do you say?
Sacked, yeah.
Sacked. They took all the books, they took all the money, so it was difficult. It was a preparation for a change that Salinas made 2 years after, that was to eliminate the idea of eight species reserved to the cooperative sector and privatize it. So that also changed me. Then I was in the in Congress. We had this thing with the oil men and many other things, but it was very restricted because it was a prehistoric idea. Even if Manlio talks about being modern, no. It was very, very, very old. So then there was 88, that was 88 to 91. Then I wanted to run as federal representative, but I didn't have money. So I decided to do something that was costless but effective. So I decided to join a maquiladora. Of course, I was full of prejudices. I dressed myself as a worker, so with jeans and no makeup and a t-shirt, and although I was a state representative, the girls that were recruiting didn't recognize me. And of course, the women, the young women that went to work there were beautiful. They were, beautiful dressed with makeup, but I had these crazy ideas of workers. And so I went there, and they first put me into, in the first department. It was a factory that was building the complex of wires that runs into these big trucks. I don't know the word in...
It's called a harness.
The harness, exactly.
Yeah.
Arneses in español, yeah. And it was so simple, and I said, how is it that in Mexico we cannot do this? It's so simple. So at the second day, they said, you are very productive. You're very productive, so we're going to move you to the Department of Control de Calidad, quality control. And there you're going to earn whatever you want, because once you pass this quota, you will produce more and will pay you extra. So I said, I'm going to find all the workers there working rapidly. So I went there, and everybody was working normally. He said, why is it that you're not trying to earn more? Well, the incentives are so miserable that we are not going to work for them like that. So it was a revolving door. Every 5 months, the workers renewed itself because they won the minimum wage, and the company had a bad arrangement with the Social Security, so that they didn't really care for workers. And then in order to have some extra perceptions, you have to have perfect attendance. It was impossible to have perfect attendance because there were women in the, from 18 to 40. So they were all in the fertile years, they were all young mothers. It was impossible. So I went there from 7 to 3 p.m. Oh, and then they said, this is the lunch area. So I said, oh, good, it's going to be lunch. No, it was just cement tables where you put your lunch. And well, it was from 7 to 3, and then at 5 I was campaigning, transformed. I was campaigning. So I called my husband and I said, in Hermosillo, and I said, okay, organize for me a press conference because I'm going to quit the factory and state who I am and so on and so forth. Which factory? He didn't know. He was... So I organized this, we organized this conference, and I went there and I said, this is what's happening. People is working here without age, adequate protected age. There were some people working from 12 years old, and the labor rights are not respected. So what happened was very interesting because the workers felt represented, and a strike went wildfire. It was 4 big factories that went into strike, and they discovered when they went into strike that they had a trade union from the CTM. So they surrounded the house of the trade union leader, and the trade union leader, very smart, said, better red than dead. So he kept the negotiations with the owners, and they won important things. So he said, oh, now I'm going to win because soy la señora de la maquiladora, and everybody's going to love me in Guaymas. And I confess I still don't understand the heart of the elector. For example, in the case of the United States, I don't understand So first I thought we did a very healthy thing, stopping the oil workers' trade union stealing. Oh, no, 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 people hated us. Because with that money, they sent their children to summer camps in the US, they paid for the Tec de Monterrey, and, you know, we stopped that. So first thing. Second thing, we still thought in terms of workers and things like that. So there was a wonderful person who was the legal defender, a lawyer, no, who was always defended the fishermen. So he was poor and ugly. So he was our candidate, but he was good. So the PAN named a candidate who was a millionaire that was in jail for, I think, 1 year because he made a fraud, but they couldn't prove, so he went out. He was handsome, white, elegant, and he had a Lincoln Continental silver. His wife had a red Lincoln Continental, you know? Yeah. So what did the people do? Shine their cars, and we lost the election. I learned a lesson, and I won barely by a thin hair, the right to be in Congress through the proportional plurinominal system. Yeah.
In a recent book, A Lesson for All, you described how you completely changed your view of the National Action Party, the PAN. Can you describe this change and why it was so important to you in your involvement in the political opposition later?
I don't remember. Well, the first thing is in '88 when we suffered the fraud by the PRI. We really wanted to understand how they did it and to understand more about electoral politics. So as before we were anti-electoral system, we were really ignorant. So the PAN was the one who really knew about electoral fraud and how to prevent it, and how you have to had all the feelings for vigilantes de casillas.
The fraud at the balloting box.
Yeah, at the ballot, yeah, people from your party at the balloting box. So you have to have a structure to really cover that. And so and then we had all these ideas propelled by the PRI that the PAN was traitors, that if they win the northern states, they will give them back to the United States, and things like that, which is really ominous. So when you are in Congress and you meet these people, you perhaps you don't like them, or perhaps you don't share their views, but you see many of them are really, really honest people. So the first thing that changed me was local Congress. And then the fight against fraud. So it was really very oppressive, because you have the press completely, especially if you are in Sonora, in a local state, press completely owned by the government, and the system of parties also owned by the government, and it's really very oppressive. So I committed to change it and to defeat the PRI.
When you changed professions, you encountered a long-standing practice faced by journalists and Mexican intellectuals: government censorship of controversial ideas and or critical views of Mexico's governing process. You first encountered this in the 1988 elections, and then again during the Salinas administration, when a group of us were collaborating on a major survey of citizen attitudes in Mexico, Canada, and the United States toward a trade agreement which the president was negotiating that became NAFTA. Could you tell us more about those specific censorship experiences?
Well, first I have to tell you about the experience I had with the National Congress. It was also a very enriching experience, because you arrive there with all the branding that you make to the other parties. The PRI are just servants of the president, the PAN are servants of the church, the things, all these brands. So it was a very intense legislature, because it was the second round of big reforms. For example, the reform of the third article on education. It was very interesting, and then you learned from the PRI. For example, the writing of the article that Cedillo sent to us, who was Minister of Education, was "El Estado proveerá educación gratuita a todo aquel al que lo solicita." The state will provide free education to everyone that asks for it. So immediately the PRI saw what was not as clear to us. No, not to everyone that asked for it, to everyone. To everyone. It means that if you have 10,000 Guatemalans with children, you give them education. And then, which was very interesting. And then you have the reform to the 27th article on agrarian reform. Well, it was interesting to see the PRI, how it battled the original project sent by Salinas. No? I remember very well meeting, I don't remember, he's now the president of the Bolsa de Valores and very good friend of Jaime, Luis.
Luis.
Short man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I told him, well, what do you expect with the reform of 27th article? And he said, becoming like California, you know, like the cities, mistakes. I said, oh my goodness. And then we had another very important, and the third article reform was also very important, because it lifted the prohibition of the church to have some schools. So it was very interesting that you went there with all this Juarista thing, you know, anti-church, and then you hear testimonies of many people who think their freedom is diminished by not. And then I remember my experience. I was taught in that school, you know, in a school run by nuns, that every time that the inspector was coming to the school, we were ordered to dismantle the altars, and that was the first experience I had about being censored. You know? About
great example.
Yeah. So then there was the 130th article that acknowledged officially the existence of the churches. Remember, they didn't have personalidad jurídica. So it was also very important for me, because my family is very religious. One half is from the Opus Dei and the other half is of Legionarios de Cristo. So it's good that I survived. So, and I remember that some members of my family give gave their signatures as if they were the owners of the church edifices and properties, no? Because they weren't allowed to have this. So that was also a very interesting debate, also in terms of augmenting freedoms and acknowledging that it doesn't function to live in a fantasy, fantasy world. So and then the other article that was very important that we changed was the 82nd article that allowed people with a foreign father or mother to be candidates to the presidency. We changed that so that Fox could be could be president. Well, not immediately, but 6 years after. So then I went to the campaign, and after the campaign is that I became a journalist. So in the campaign, the censorship. I remember very well when Cedillo started the campaign after Colossio's assassination. He was known by 8%. In 1 month, he was 90 something. When I finished my campaign, I was known only for 45%. So what happened is at the beginning, they did interview all the candidates, and I was almost always the fourth one to be in events and things like that. But as in May, the election was in August. As in May, they just started to put little notes about all the candidates. Little notes. And well, the other thing is I didn't believe in encuestas, in polls, which is a terrible error. It's a terrible error. I think Presidencia has given all the polls to the CIDE. So I'm going to look for it to see what's in their polls. What's in their polls, yeah. I remember some Americans coming and telling me, from one democracy thing from the United States, telling me that I was near 8%. Oh my goodness. So, but the main censorship was what I told you. I mean, not covering us, not giving us a forum.
Cecilia, you became an important role model for Mexican women who have considered careers in public life, especially in electoral politics. You've suggested that your interaction with a group of women workers in the fishing cooperative in Guaymas, Sonora, was instrumental helping them in that strike in changing your life and becoming more of a spokesman for women and feminism.
That was my main motivation. When I was a congresswoman, federal congresswoman, all my themes were environment, economics, environment and economics, and they were not women issues. At the end of the legislature, some members, some women colleagues, asked me to sign something, which was a change in the federal electoral law, saying that parties would promote women candidacies. I said, would promote. Of course I signed. That was the first reform of the electoral law that led finally to a parity thing. So I finished the campaign. Of course, I can talk more about it. And I went to 2 conferences. A preparatory conference for the Beijing conference in in Mar del Plata, Argentina, and then the 1995 Fourth World Conference on women, where I heard Hillary Clinton. That was a life-changing experience. For example, the first reaction of a woman that has built a career when it's asked about quotas, or how do you call it? Affirmative action. It's horror. No? I said, no, I did it by myself, I don't need it. So I was completely against quotas or against affirmative action. Then you go there and you see there's a system about feminism, a system of incentives, a knowledge, a program. It was worldwide. It was really moving for me. So, one important thing that happened is that in the campaign, I think I tell this in the book, in the campaign, when the day I was named, there was also a Congress of Feminists in Mexico City. So I thought, they are gonna love me. No? they are gonna love me because, I'm a candidate and I'm gonna push woman things. And so I went there, and there was this woman that are now very good friends of mine, Mata Lamas, which is like, the theoretician for the feminist movement, and then Angeles Mastreta. And they sent me a message: if you come here and go to the podium, we will step down. So they sent me, like 20 rows from there. So when I was in Beijing, one of the organizers of the Mexican delegation thought, well, we have this woman which is very well known, who was presidential candidate, and who does not know in depth feminist theory. Why don't I tell her? So I asked her, what is gender theory? So she explained to me, and it was a magnificent change. It was like seeing with new glasses and seeing the world different. And so if much of the culture around women is culturally acquired, then we can change it. So it was very interesting. The Islam was starting to become polarized, but not as now. So, for example, hearing the difference between equality and equidad. For example, there was a big debate with the Egyptian delegation. They wanted, we wanted equality for heritage rights, that women and men had the same rights to receive heritage. So the head of the Egyptian delegation said, no, I want equidad, because in my culture, if a woman becomes widow, then her brother has to support her. And if we give the same heritage, then he won't be able to, So there was all these debates about not only theory, but also the shades of how do you implement the policy. So I really changed, and when we came back, we created the National Institute, the seats for the National Institute for Women, and I became a convinced feminist. During my campaign, I was what we call in the movement mujerista. I mean, pro-women, but without the policies and programs and instruments to really give rights to women. So that's something I really, I'm sorry I missed that opportunity to use the campaign to, but I of course I knew I was going to lose, but if I inspired the young women so that they can see their role in the world without limits, that was all I needed.
As a female candidate for the presidency, did you encounter resistance or situations during the campaign which you would attribute to your gender? At the same time, do you believe that as early as 1994, had you been a candidate of the could you, as a woman, have won that election?
That's a very good question. First, because of being a woman, I encountered resistance and aperture and openness. I caught them by surprise. You know, the idea of a woman saying subject, verb, and complement without equivocation, that was something surprising. So I was not educated in the pre-culture, I was not educated in the traditional left, so I had a different speech, a discourse. So people were really, really very surprised, very, very surprised. And that opened me a lot of places where I could speak with the other three big candidates. At the same time, I had all these silly questions, that Corazon Aquino has been a very bad president. Chamorro has been a very bad president. What? I said, well, I tell them, if you name 2 bad presidents, woman, I can tell you 500 men. No? Many cartoons against my husband. My husband going to the supermarket. Cartoons were so aggressive, designing me as a whore and things like this, that my team didn't want to show it to me. So one day a neighbor told me, "Did you see this?" So it was this woman in bikini, myself in bikini, with excess fat here and there and false eyelashes and things. So I wanted to cry, and I told my husband, "Look at this." So he told me, "Listen, if this was true, I will sue the gym you go." So it changed, the perspective. But yeah, they were things were very, very aggressive. And the PRD, which I am in their block, was also very, very aggressive because they thought, they have all these illusions that Cuauhtemoc was going to win. And I tell in the book that Cuauhtemoc went there one day before. So you find these two things, and there was also this Cecilia thing. People started to call me Cecilia, and they thought it was wonderful, People in the demos, and they thought it was something nice to me to call me. I hated it, because you won't vote for president for a sexy woman. I hated it, but it created noise within me. I remember one journalist that asked me what did I think about being called Cecilia, and instead of telling him, I hated it, I was, because what happens to you when you are a candidate is that you really start to see people simply as potential voters. So you censor yourself, you transform yourself. Huh? And there was also this reportaje, this thing by a reporter who made an interview of me, and then I didn't see that his photographer was taking picture of my legs. So the interview was myself, and all the pictures were of my legs. Oh. Yeah. You know, I was feisty, so no problem. And then I think I would have won. You know,
if you had been the Greek.
Yeah, taking into account the PRI was very, very strong, and I was a good candidate.
Would you run again?
Only in a big party. Yeah. Only in a big party. It's a wonderful experience, very intense, and it's a privilege. But if it's in a small party, it's also very difficult for you personally.
So in the opposition against you as a candidate was sometimes the opposition because you are from Sonora and you were speaking to people in the federal district or Mexico City today. So you represented the big rancho, and these are urban, sophisticated people.
No, the resentment, you mean the PRD critique? No, it was because Cuauhtemoc really won the 88 election.
Right.
So they thought in 94 he's going to win. But they didn't do their job, and he didn't. So they said any candidate that is, any extra candidate that is, it's just to take votes out of him. So I never attacked him. I was very nice and clean with him. I had a different program, and so I don't have resentment now.
Can you explain to us what's going to happen with Mexico City's political designation and government in the future?
It's something very near statehood. It's called Entidad Federativa. It's the only difference. In state you are autonomous and sovereign, which is fantasy. And Mexico City is only autonomous. It's almost, why not the same? Because we are here the hosts of the national powers, no? Right. So that's the difference. But it's very, it's a change. It's an interesting change because it started in 97, no? And always the argument is unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. So first to elect the mayor, then to elect the local Congress, then this, then that. So, for example, Mexico City was the only one that didn't participate in the constitutional process of amendments. Only the states. Right. We didn't have the right to send initiatives to the Congress. The president named the head of the police. The Senate could take down the mayor. Many things. And we're about to finish a very audacious constitution or charter, very, very audacious, which for the very first time gives flesh and body to the reform on human rights we made on 2011. No? In that reform, we acknowledged that the human rights were inherent to the human people, to people. They were not granted by the Constitution, but they were inherent. And And that's it. That was the Constitution. There are the rights. It's more beautifully written than before, but that's it. This Constitution says, okay, we're going to create a system where people can demand the fulfillment of those rights. We're going to align our budget to the fulfillment of those rights. We're going to consecrate some rights, as for example the same-sex marriage, which was very interesting. All the delegates from the president voted for it. All 8 delegates from the PRI voted for it. 8 from the PAN voted for it, and all the left voted for it. Right to una muerte digna. A dignified death. Many third-generation rights. And then it's going to change completely the system of political control in Mexico City. What are called now delegations, they will be called like alcaldías, which is not mayorships, but alcaldías. And they are going to have a council of 60% of the party that won the election and 40% of the party that didn't win the election. So they are going to be there, they're going to participate, they are going to approve or not the budget. So it's really a major change.